the timer? And let's begin. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against deceive offenses and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, and by a sleep to say we end the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. Hamlet, by William Shakespeare. Words have always had a special kind of power, able to turn hearts, change minds, and stir people to a new way of thinking. And those who know how to use words properly can find that they have the world at their fingertips. Today, we'll look at the life of a great wordsmith of the past who knew the power of words and used that power to speak truth to an eager audience. Today, I hope to inspire you to realize the power of words, take hold of that power, and to delve back into the richness of the works of William Shakespeare. So where do we begin? Even when writing this speech, I struggled to find a starting place, for the life, works, and impact of Shakespeare is a vast topic, with many stories to be told. So perhaps the person who can best guide us on this journey would be William himself, for surely he would know which path is best to take when rediscovering his life. In one of Shakespeare's earliest plays, As You Like It, he lays down one of the most well-known monologues in his playwriting career. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. Today, using this monologue as our guide, we will move through the 7 ages of Shakespeare's life and see how his own words spoke true in his life. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Shakespeare was born on Henley Street in bustling Stratford-upon-Avon, England in 1564 to John and Mary Shakespeare. They were an average working-class family. John was a glover as well as holding numerous public offices, from wine taster to bailiff. Shakespeare was the third of 8 children, although only 5 made it out of their childhood years due to sickness. And then the schoolboy, with shining morning face and satchel, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. Shakespeare was enrolled in the Stratford Grammar School around the age of 7. He, like all other school children of his day, would have been trained in classical mythology, as well as read both Holinshed's History of England and Plutarch's Lives of noble Greeks and Romans. He drew from all of these later in his life when coming up with the plots for his plays and sonnets. And contrary to opinions posted in online debates and popular movies like Anonymous, there is no real reason to believe that Shakespeare was simply a pseudonym. And then the lover, sighing like a furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. In Shakespeare's early history and childhood online, it says, quote, little is known about Shakespeare after his leaving school, but it is widely believed that he left Stratford and studied intensely to become a master at his literary craft. However, it is from this period, known as the lost years, that we gain one vital piece of information about Shakespeare. He married a pregnant orphan named Anne Hathaway, end quote. It was a hurried marriage, for sadly in those days it was not uncommon for a bride to be pregnant at her wedding. The couple had 3 children, first Susanna and then the twins, Hamnet and Judith, all before Shakespeare was 20. This forced him to leave his father's business as a glover and look for other business outside of Stratford. He left Stratford for London in 1592. And then the soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. Shakespeare was never a soldier, but we see this part of his life mirrored in his tragedies and historical pieces. Shakespeare was born in the right place at the right time. Prior to the time of Shakespeare, the theater was only used for Bible plays and religious plays. Within 10 years before Shakespeare was born, the first theaters and playhouses were opened. He was born at the close of the Reformation, which brought freedom for secular plays to be introduced. The theater could now be used for entertainment purposes rather than just the purposes of the Catholic Church. He was also born during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, who had a great love for the arts and encouraged people to become playwrights and artists. Also, all of the Greek classics were finally being translated into English with the invention of the printing press. In other words, Shakespeare was a brilliant man, born with everything needed at his fingertips to foster a creative mind. However, Shakespeare almost never came up with his own plots for his plays and sonnets. Most of them came from stories or history that had been passed down from generation to generation. This made his job easier, as he knew most of his audience would be acquainted with the plot already, allowing him to move quicker, since most of his plays ran for only about 2 hours. Shakespeare also had a very strong sense of morality in all of his plays, but it is strongly felt in his tragedies and historical pieces. He had certain standards in his plays he would not allow to be violated. For instance, evil was never portrayed to have a good outcome. Villains were not allowed to die a glorious death on stage. Women were treated respectfully, and the clergy and the church were never put in a negative light. It's interesting to contrast entertainment today with entertainment a few hundred years ago. In plays and movies today, directors feel the need to add what they call thematic elements to draw an audience in, usually involving sensuality or greed. Shakespeare, one of the most successful playwrights of all time, never used this tactic. For even as a man with little religious background, he understood the importance of having honor and dignity even for fictitious characters. And then, the justice, in fair round belly with good cape and lined, with eyes severe and beard of a formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. Many of Shakespeare's later plays were filled with his wit and wisdom through the role of fools. Shakespeare's plays usually had a main plot, a subplot, and then a fool that tied the two together, and it was his job to lighten the mood whenever something unfortunate would occur. But he had one other job. Because the fool was the fool, he was given leave to say whatever he liked the way he saw it. So oftentimes, at the climax of the play, the fool would rush in, say something bluntly profound, and help the protagonist to make a decision. Shakespeare also had very strong female characters in all of his plays. In all but one of his comedies, a woman dresses up as a man to save the day. This was a fun plot device for him in several ways. First of all, Shakespeare had complete freedom on stage, and thus was able to present the idea that women were equal to men and deserving of respect. Also in Shakespeare's day, women were not allowed to act. So the audience would heave with laughter as a man, dressed up as a woman, dressed up as a man, would rush in to save the day. The sixth age ships is the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish trebles, pipes, and whistles in his sound. As Shakespeare's life drew to a close, so did his time as playwright and director. Theaters became less popular, and many closed during outbreaks of the Black Plague. Around the same time, one of Shakespeare's main commissioners died, taking with him much of Shakespeare's salary. Although it is impossible to trace Shakespeare after his leaving the stage, it is widely believed that he returned to Stratford to live out the rest of his days in peace. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Shakespeare died on April 23rd, 1616. His cause of death is unknown. He left such things in his will to friends as rings, swords, and other small items. To his wife, he left nothing but his second best bed. We don't know if this was a parting blow or a kind gesture, as the second best bed could have been the one they slept in together. No mention was made in Shakespeare's will about his plays, except for singling out John Hemmings and William Cundall to be the editors of his first folio. Shakespeare was buried in the chancel of Holy Trinity Church on April 25th. On his grave, he wrote an epitaph for himself. Good friends, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust and close it here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he who moves my bones. But Shakespeare's legacy did not die in 1616. It lives on in his plays and sonnets. He has captivated thousands of audiences and showed them there is power in the spoken word. And he left traces of his rich language all around us. Phrases such as, all that glistens is not gold, wild goose chase, too much of a good thing, love is blind, all the world's my oyster, the jig is up, come what may, and all the world's a stage. He showed us that entertainment can be educational and wholesome and still be enjoyable. He showed us that morals should be upheld even on stage. But Shakespeare left a challenge hidden in his works. In one of Shakespeare's most remembered plays, Macbeth paints a grim description of a life devoid of meaning. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, yet signifying nothing. I believe we are to be challenged by these words. Let your life be heard. Don't let it be lost in meaningless time without a voice. Rise up above the average knowledge and use of the language and harness it to change lives and history for the good. I encourage you to take your cue from the great Lord of the Theater and find your story to tell. Thank you.